I have the honor to deliver the following statement on behalf of more than 80 states and organizations regarding the latest Israeli decisions concerning the occupied West Bank. We strongly condemn the unilateral Israeli decisions and measures aimed at expanding the unlawful Israeli presence in the West Bank. Such decisions are contrary to Israel's obligations under international law and must be immediately reversed. We underline in this regard our strong opposition to any form of annexation. We reiterate our rejection of all measures aimed at altering the demographic composition, character, and status of the Palestinian territory occupied since 1967, including East Jerusalem. These types of unilateral measures directly contravene and violate international law, significantly undermine and weaken ongoing efforts for peace and stability in the region, are fundamentally inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, and seriously jeopardize the long-term prospects of reaching a final peace agreement to end the conflict. We reaffirm our commitment, as reflected in the New York Declaration, to take concrete measures in accordance with international law and in line with the relevant UN resolutions and the 19th of July 2024 advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice. To help realize the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination and to counter the illegal settlement policy in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem, as well as policies and threats of forcible displacement and annexation. We reiterate that a just and lasting peace must be based on the relevant United Nations resolutions, the Madrid terms of reference, including the principle of land for peace and the Arab Peace Initiative, ending the Israeli occupation that began in 1967 and implementing the two-state solution in which two democratic states, an independent and sovereign Palestine and Israel, live side by side in peace and security within secure and recognized borders. On the basis of the 1967 lines, including with regard to Jerusalem, this remains the only path to ensure security and stability in the region.
More than 80 member states and several international organizations have issued a joint condemnation of Israel's decision to begin registering land in the occupied West Bank as state property, calling it a violation of international law and demanding its immediate reversal. Palestinian Ambassador to the United Nations Riyad Mansour delivered the statement on Tuesday at a press conference at UN headquarters in New York, speaking on behalf of 85 member states and a number of regional and international organizations, according to Al Jazeera, Arab News, and the Associated Press of Pakistan. The joint statement expressed what the signatories described as strong condemnation of unilateral Israeli decisions and measures aimed at expanding what they called Israel's unlawful presence in the West Bank, and underlined their opposition to any form of annexation. The coalition of signatories stretched across multiple continents and political blocs. According to Clash Report and multiple outlets, the countries backing the statement included Australia, Canada, China, France, Pakistan, Russia, South Korea, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates, alongside the European Union, the League of Arab States, and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. The breadth of the coalition, spanning Western democracies, major Asian powers, Arab and Muslim majority states, and multilateral organizations, reflects the scale of international opposition to Israel's actions. The press conference took place one day ahead of a scheduled United Nations Security Council meeting on Wednesday, which is expected to address the same measures. The immediate trigger for the joint statement was an Israeli cabinet decision on February 15th to authorize a land registration process in Area C of the occupied West Bank, the first such registration since Israel captured the territory in the 1967 war, according to NPR, CNN, Al Jazeera, and the Times of Israel. Area C constitutes approximately 60% of the West Bank and is under full Israeli military and civilian control. The resolution allocated an initial budget of 244 million shekels, approximately $79 million, for the registration process from 2026 to 2030 and established 35 new positions in various ministries and state agencies to conduct the work, according to the Times of Israel. Under the registration process, Israeli authorities will announce certain areas to undergo land title settlement, requiring anyone with a claim to the land to submit documents proving ownership, according to NPR. The Israeli anti-settlement group Peace Now alleges the decision amounts to what it calls a mega land grab, warning that the registration process could result in a vast transfer of Palestinian property to the state, leaving Palestinians with no practical ability to exercise their ownership rights. Hagit Ofran of Peace now told the Associated Press that Palestinians would be sent to prove ownership in a way that they will never be able to do, and estimated that Israel could take over 83% of Area C through the process. The land registration decision followed a separate set of measures reported to have been approved by Israel's Security Cabinet on February 8th, which significantly expanded Israeli civilian authority into areas A and B of the West Bank. The 40% of the territory that under the Oslo Accords has been under Palestinian Authority civilian control, according to ABC News, Al Jazeera, and Middle East Eye. Those measures included scrapping a Jordanian-era law that prevented Jewish individuals from buying land in the West Bank, declassifying previously protected land registry records, expanding Israeli enforcement and demolition authority into PA-controlled areas, and transferring construction authority at religious sites in Hebron to the Israeli government, according to multiple outlets. Peace Now, the Times of Israel, and analysts described the combined effect as the effective termination of the Oslo Accords framework. The measures were promoted by Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich and Defense Minister Israel Katz, according to Al Jazeera and the Times of Israel. Katz stated that the government was anchoring settlement as an inseparable part of Israel's government policy, according to Al Jazeera. The Israel Policy Forum, an American analysis group, argued that the Israeli government did more than make it easier for Jews to build homes in the West Bank, saying it announced more definitively than it ever has its intention to annex every inch of the whole thing. A 2026 poll cited by the Media Line found that 71% of Israelis oppose the establishment of a Palestinian state, and 68% support some form of Israeli sovereignty in part or all of the West Bank. In Tuesday's joint statement, Mansour declared that the decisions are contrary to Israel's obligations under international law and must be immediately reversed. The statement reiterated rejection of all measures aimed at altering the demographic composition, character, and status of the Palestinian territory occupied since 1967, including East Jerusalem. It warned that such measures violate international law, undermine ongoing efforts for peace and stability in the region, run counter to the comprehensive plan, and jeopardize the prospects of reaching a peace agreement ending the conflict. The statement also reaffirmed commitment to the New York Declaration and pledged concrete measures in accordance with the July 19, 2024, advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice. The reference to the ICJ advisory opinion carries significant legal weight. The International Court of Justice ruled in July 2024 that Israel's continued presence in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem, is unlawful and should be brought to an end as rapidly as possible. The joint statement invoked the opinion to reinforce the coalition's call for concrete measures to help realize the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination and to counter what it described as the illegal settlement policy. UN spokesman Stéphane Dujarric, speaking on February 16th, similarly cited the ICJ, saying that Israel's measures are not only destabilizing but, as recalled by the International Court of Justice, unlawful, according to UN News. The coalition reaffirmed its support for the two-state solution, calling it the only path to ensure security and stability in the region. The statement specifically envisioned two democratic states, an independent and sovereign Palestine and Israel, living side by side in peace and security within their secure and recognized borders on the basis of the 1967 lines, including with regard to Jerusalem. It referenced the Madrid Terms of Reference, including the principle of land for peace, and the Arab Peace Initiative as the framework for just and lasting peace. The language echoed long-standing international consensus on the parameters for resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but the scale of the coalition delivering it represented an escalation in diplomatic pressure. The joint statement came on top of a series of individual and institutional condemnations that had been building since the February 8th Security Cabinet decisions. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres condemned the measures and called on the Israeli government to immediately reverse them, with his spokesman warning that the current trajectory is eroding the prospect of a two-state solution, according to UN News. The European Union called the measures a step in the wrong direction. Britain called on Israel to reverse its decision. Spain warned that the measures risk triggering a new wave of violence. 8 Arab and Muslim-majority foreign ministers from Egypt, Jordan, the UAE, Indonesia, Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar issued a separate joint statement calling the decisions aimed at imposing unlawful Israeli sovereignty, according to Al Jazeera. The United States occupied a complicated position in the condemnation. President Trump told Axios on February 10th that he was against annexation, adding that the U.S. did not need to be dealing with the West Bank. A White House official separately stated that a stable West Bank keeps Israel secure and is in line with this administration's goal to achieve peace in the region, according to the Times of Israel and Reuters. However, the Trump administration has not taken concrete steps to prevent or penalize the Israeli measures, and critics note that Washington has avoided curbing Israel's accelerated settlement building despite its stated opposition to annexation, according to the Washington Post. Peace Now directly addressed Trump, warning that Netanyahu is deceiving you and that he is carrying out annexation under his nose, according to Press TV. The Washington Post published an analysis on February 18th, reporting that the United States has not intervened while Israel continues to expand control over the West Bank, despite Washington's stated opposition to annexation. The report noted that despite Trump's opposition to annexation, Israel has continued to take steps that experts say may lead to the seizure of territory. The gap between Washington's rhetoric and its actions has become one of the central tensions in the crisis. Arab states that were considering normalization agreements with Israel under the Abraham Accords framework have expressed alarm that annexation could foreclose the two-state solution that underpins their willingness to engage, a dynamic that directly affects American strategic interests in the region. The Palestinian Authority described the combined measures as dangerous decisions and an unprecedented escalation targeting the Palestinian presence, according to ABC News and Al Jazeera. President Mahmoud Abbas's office called the measures a blatant violation of the Oslo Accords and demanded intervention from the United States and the European Union. Hamas called on people in the West Bank to intensify the confrontation with the occupation and its settlers, according to Al Jazeera. Jordan's foreign ministry condemned the decisions as aimed at imposing illegal Israeli sovereignty and entrenching settlements, a particularly sensitive matter given that forced displacement from the West Bank would directly affect Jordan, according to Al Jazeera. The implications for Jordan are particularly acute. According to Al Jazeera, a Jordanian analyst noted that the cabinet decisions represent a serious and sensitive matter for Jordan, especially if thousands of Palestinians face forced displacement from the West Bank. Jordan's 1994 peace treaty with Israel was premised on the assumption that a two-state solution would eventually be realized. If Israel's actions effectively foreclose that possibility, the foundation of the peace agreement is undermined. The analyst added that Israel has been acting against the principles of the Jordan-Israel peace agreement for years, seeking the expansionist Greater Israel agenda rather than the conditions for cooperation that the treaty was designed to create. The political decisions have been accompanied by escalating violence on the ground. According to the latest United Nations figures cited by Al Jazeera, at least 1,054 Palestinians were killed in the West Bank by Israeli soldiers and settlers from October 7, 2023 to February 5, 2026. Al Jazeera's correspondent in Hebron reported an immediate spike in settler violence following the February 8 cabinet decisions. Settlers reportedly raided the Al-Rasheda Mosque east of Bethlehem, stealing its contents and causing severe damage, according to Al Jazeera. In Bani Naim, east of Hebron, settlers allegedly beat an 80-year-old disabled Palestinian man. Demolition notices were issued in communities east of Hebron, and demolitions were carried out in Bedouin communities in the northern Jordan Valley. The scale of the settlement enterprise provides context for why the land registration decision has generated such alarm. More than 700,000 illegal Israeli settlers live in Area C and occupied East Jerusalem across more than 250 illegal settlements, according to Al Jazeera. The land registration process, combined with the new rules allowing direct private land purchases, the removal of protective oversight mechanisms, and the declassification of land registries that were previously sealed to prevent fraud, creates what analysts describe as an open market for settler land acquisition. Middle East Eye reported that the combined measures effectively erased the distinctions between areas A, B, and C that formed the backbone of the Oslo Accords framework. The political context within Israel is also significant. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has described the establishment of any Palestinian state as a security threat and faces an election later this year, according to NBC News. The far-right coalition partners who drove the measures, including Smotrich, have made the expansion of settlements and the establishment of Israeli sovereignty over the entire West Bank a core policy objective. The Israel Policy Forum noted that Smotrich's strategy has been to civilianize what used to be governed under military law, gradually replacing military administration with civilian bureaucracy to blur the distinction between the West Bank and Israel proper. The pattern of Israeli actions defying even its closest ally has been building for months. In July 2025, the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, passed a non-binding resolution in support of West Bank annexation. Then in October, when U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance was visiting Israel, the Knesset approved 2 more bills calling for formal annexation, a move Vance reportedly called a very stupid political stunt intended to embarrass him, according to The Conversation. In September 2025, Trump announced that he would not allow Israel to annex the West Bank, according to the Times of Israel. Despite those warnings, Israel has continued advancing a series of measures that watchdog groups describe as de facto annexation by administration, avoiding a formal declaration while implementing the substance through bureaucratic and legal mechanisms. Analysts broadly agree that the combined measures represent de facto annexation, even without a formal declaration. The Conversation wrote that the recent measures help establish deeper facts on the ground that render annexation a fait accompli. CNN reported that Peace Now warned the Israeli government had approved the measure despite Trump's stated opposition to annexation. Al Jazeera's correspondent described the February 8th measures as the most dangerous and serious push towards annexation and the most critical decision since Israel occupied the West Bank in 1967. Dalal Irakat, a professor of diplomacy and conflict resolution, warned that the situation has moved beyond the point of political maneuvering, according to Al Jazeera. The joint statement delivered by Mansour on Tuesday represents the most coordinated international response to date. But the critical question is whether diplomatic condemnation will translate into concrete consequences. Wednesday's Security Council meeting will test whether the growing coalition of states is prepared to move beyond statements toward binding measures. The United States holds veto power in the Security Council, and despite Trump's stated opposition to annexation, Washington has consistently shielded Israel from binding resolutions. For the 85 states and organizations that signed Tuesday's statement, the challenge is converting unprecedented diplomatic alignment into action that actually reverses the trajectory. For Palestinians, the land registration process represents not an abstract policy debate, but an imminent threat to homes, property, and the remaining possibility of statehood. Subscribe to WLA for continuous coverage as the Security Council takes up this critical issue.